You send a text, you see the little typing bubble pop up, you wait, and then nothing.
Oh, that is just the absolute worst feeling.
Right. The bubble vanishes and hours turn into days. The silence starts to feel really heavy. And eventually, you go to check their profile just to see if they posted anything, and you're met with just a completely blank screen.
Yeah, you've been ghosted.
Exactly. Ghosted, or honestly, even worse, abruptly blocked without a single word of explanation. So, welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we are bypassing the hurt feelings and we're looking directly at the raw neuroscience and psychology of digital disconnection. We're pulling from psychological studies on cyber psychology, relationship coaches, attachment theory experts.
It's a really comprehensive stack of sources
It
today.
is. Our mission today is to unpack exactly what is happening in the brain, both yours and theirs, when someone ghosts, orbits, stonewalls, or blocks you.
And it is a fascinating, albeit super painful psychological landscape.
Ah,
Because when someone disappears on you, I mean, it feels incredibly personal. It feels like an attack, right?
yeah. Oh, totally. It feels like you did something completely wrong.
Exactly. But there is a profound, really predictable science behind these behaviors. And the sources show that by understanding the secret psychological mechanics of, why people just vanish, you can actually stop internalizing their silence. And more importantly, you learn how to take your own power back.
I love that. So let's get right into the mechanics of this. Starting with why getting ghosted drives the human brain absolutely up the wall. Because to understand the panic we feel, we really have to look at how our minds process incomplete information.
Right.
So the sources use this great analogy, the information gap theory. Think about a triangle, but the bottom line is missing, just an upside down V. Or imagine someone walks right into your house, sits down on your couch, and just leaves your front door standing wide open.
It makes you anxious just thinking about it.
Yeah, your brain gets incredibly agitated. You can't focus on anything else. You just want to get up and physically close that door. And a sudden ghosting is basically the ultimate open door for your brain.
That's um, that's a perfect way to visualize it because what you're describing is driven by a psychological phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect, or sometimes you'll hear it pronounced the Zajic effect.
Okay, the Zajic effect.
Yeah. And the core principle here is that human beings are just hardwired to remember incomplete or interrupted experiences far more vividly than completed ones.
Because it's a survival thing, right?
Exactly. Evolutionarily, an unresolved situation could mean literal danger. So, our brains absolutely crave narrative completion to feel safe. When someone vanishes without a trace, they deny you that completion.
Which explains why we can't stop obsessing over it. Your
Yeah.
brain is just sitting there going, did I say something wrong? Like what that joke I made last Tuesday, was I being too clingy?
Oh, absolutely.
Your brain would literally rather invent a narrative where you are the bad guy just to close the loop than accept that agonizing uncertainty.
Precisely. Without that closure, you experience intense cognitive dissonance. Logically, you probably know the interaction or the relationship is likely over. But emotionally and neurologically, your brain is just trapped in a loop. It's trying to solve a complex puzzle, but someone permanently hid 3 of the corner pieces.
That's so frustrating. And it goes much deeper than just an annoying mental itch, doesn't it? Because looking at the cyber psychology journals, ghosting isn't just someone being rude or, lacking text etiquette. Psychologically, it actually registers in our minds as ostracism.
It does. And ostracism is actually one of the most painful experiences a human can endure. When we look at models like the temporal need threat model, which is
Mm.
heavily featured in the Pankani study we reviewed, we see that being ghosted doesn't just hurt your feelings, it actually threatens 4 fundamental human needs simultaneously.
Okay, walk me through those. How does silence threaten our basic needs?
So first, it attacks your need for belonging. We are tribal creatures,
Right.
right? So being cut off signals that you've been ejected from the group.
Hmm.
Second, it completely devastates your self-esteem. Your brain internalizes the silence as, I am not even worth the 30 seconds it takes to type out a quick goodbye text.
Ugh. Yeah, that stings.
It really does. Third, it threatens your need for a meaningful existence.
Wait, really? That sounds so intense. How does a missing text threaten your literal existence?
I know it sounds dramatic, but think about it. When you speak into the void and receive absolutely nothing back, it makes you feel invisible. It makes you feel as though your actions have zero impact on the world around you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see that.
And finally, the fourth threat is to your need for control. Ghosting strips all your agency away in an instant. You can't force a response, so you are left entirely powerless.
You feel totally out of control, which makes perfect sense of why it's so devastating. But, okay, if someone wants to completely cut you off to avoid you, why do they sometimes, like, stick around in the background?
Ah, right.
Because there's this related, highly confusing behavior we need to talk about called orbiting.
Yes, orbiting.
This is when they completely cut off direct communication. Like, they won't reply to a text to save their life, but they still watch every single one of your social media stories. They might even drop a like on a post. Why would someone cut the cord but still lurk in your digital orbit? Isn't that totally
It
contradictory?
seems contradictory, yeah.
Yeah.
But for the orbiter, it actually serves a highly specific self-protective purpose. Orbiting creates an aura of extreme ambiguity. The orbiter is actively avoiding the discomfort, the guilt, and the direct confrontation of a real conversation.
Right.
But by watching your stories or dropping a random like, they are keeping a tiny, microscopic thread of connection alive.
So it's like they're keeping one foot in the door just in case they get lonely later.
That's exactly it. They get the comfort of knowing what you're up to without any of that actual responsibility of interacting with you. But for the person being orbited, I mean, it is pure agony.
Because it's so confusing.
Exactly. It leaves you in the state of suspended animation.
Mhm.
You start interpreting a view on your Instagram story as an attempt at relationship repair. You think, oh, they watched my story within 5 minutes of me posting it, so they must miss me.
But they still aren't reaching out.
Right. So it just prolongs the psychological distress and actively prevents you from mourning the end of the connection.
It's basically digital breadcrumbing. And
Yeah.
it keeps that Zeigarnik effect loop standing wide open. But, before someone completely disappears digitally, the sources point out that the breakdown usually starts in person. The physical, real-world equivalent of ghosting is stonewalling,
Yes.
where someone just completely shuts down and stops responding during a discussion.
Yeah, they become a literal stone wall. They hold their neck rigid. They avoid eye contact. They stop nodding or making those little affirmative sounds that show they're actually listening.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I struggle with this distinction. If I'm trying to resolve a conflict, or maybe I'm even crying, and someone is just staring blankly at a wall, ignoring me, that feels incredibly manipulative. How is that not just a toxic manipulation tactic? Isn't that just the silent treatment to punish you?
That is a very common
Yeah.
and super understandable reaction. But the sources highlight an incredibly important distinction here, based on the foundational research of relationship psychologist Dr. John Gottman.
Okay.
The silent treatment is a purposeful punishment. It's a conscious, calculated choice to ignore someone, to exert power, or, make them beg for attention.
Right.
Stonewalling, however, is almost always an unintentional physiological response.
Unintentional. How can ignoring someone sitting right in front of you be unintentional?
Because the person is experiencing what Gottman calls emotional flooding. The emotional demand of the conflict simply outweighs their psychological capacity to process it. Their sympathetic nervous system literally goes into severe overdrive. We're talking about a heart rate spiking, well over 100 beats per minute. Cortisol is flooding their bloodstream. They might start sweating. They might even lose peripheral vision. Their brain essentially just shorts out.
So they are literally going into fight or flight mode.
Mostly flight or freeze, yeah.
Yeah.
They present that stone wall because they are completely overwhelmed. Their brain is shutting down non-essential functions like empathy, active listening, verbal processing, just to prepare for a physical threat.
That's wild.
Yeah, they aren't trying to punish you. They're literally in survival mode, trying to block out the overwhelming stimuli of your emotions and their own.
Okay, so they look like they couldn't care less, but inside, their internal alarm bells are just deafening. But I mean, even if we understand that it's a nervous system response and not malicious, it's still incredibly destructive to be on the receiving end.
Oh, absolutely. It is lethal to relationships. Gottman actually identifies stonewalling as the final step in the four horsemen of the apocalypse for relationships.
Right, the four horsemen.
Yeah, it usually follows a pattern. First, there's criticism, then contempt, which leads to defensiveness, and finally, when the defensiveness fails, the person stonewalls. And the crazy part is, once stonewalling becomes a regular, habitual response to conflict, it predicts 90% of divorces within a 4-year period.
90%. I mean, it makes sense because how can you possibly resolve anything if one person physically cannot stay in the room, emotionally speaking? And I thought it was a really fascinating detail that the studies show Men typically have a lower physiological threshold for this kind of emotional flooding during conflicts. Like they get overwhelmed and hit that stonewalling stage faster.
That's true.
Though women absolutely report using stonewalling behaviors too.
Correct. It's a breakdown of emotional regulation. And while there are slight physiological trends, anyone can experience emotional flooding when they feel trapped by a conflict.
Okay, so if stonewalling is the physical manifestation of overwhelm, what happens when that translates to our phones? It basically manifests as the ultimate impenetrable boundary, the block button. Why do people escalate from just not texting back to a hard digital block? Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources outline the core 4 reasons people block an ex.
Yeah, blocking feels so aggressive, but the motivations behind it are surprisingly varied.
Let's break those down. The first one is basically the attempt to just forget the person exists. It's almost like they're doing a digital Marie Kondo on their life, like
Right.
trying to remove emotional clutter.
Exactly. It's an anxiety management strategy. For some people, simply seeing your name pop up in a story view or seeing a photo of you smiling, it triggers a massive emotional spike that they just don't want to deal with. So they remove the visual clutter, they block you because they lack the emotional regulation to handle the reminder of your existence.
Wow. Then there's the second reason, which is the reactionary attempt. It's blocking someone specifically to elicit a reaction. It's based on psychological reactance, which is the theory that taking away someone's free will makes them want it back. So they block you, hoping you'll freak out, realize what you lost, and try to force a conversation through another channel.
It's a highly passive-aggressive maneuver. They are essentially testing your devotion. They want you to chase them, to find a way around the block, just to validate their own worth and prove that you still care.
Which is incredibly toxic. And that ties right into the third reason, which is just a pure power move. It's a narcissistic attempt to officially win the breakup or the fight. If they block you, they get the final word, they shut the door, and they hold the key.
It reclaims their sense of control, exactly. And the fourth common driver is simply societal expectation. We live in an era where, cutting out toxic people is heavily romanticized.
Right.
There is this intense cultural pressure that dictates you must completely block and erase an ex to properly heal and move on, even if a softer boundary would have sufficed.
Right, the whole new year, new me, toxic energy blocked mentality. But beyond those 4 conscious reasons, the sources bring in attachment theory, which adds a really deep layer here, especially for people who are highly avoidant. If someone has a dismissive avoidant attachment style, blocking isn't just about keeping you away.
No, and this is perhaps the most illuminating part of the psychology of blocking. For a dismissive avoidant, blocking is often a way to create artificial space to protect themselves from their own impulses.
Wait, what?
Yeah, people with highly avoidant attachment styles deeply fear vulnerability. They don't trust their own messy emotions.
So wait, they block you so that they can't reach out to you?
Yes. In the aftermath of a disconnect, they might feel a sudden urge to text you when they feel lonely or nostalgic. But to an avoidant, giving in to that vulnerability feels incredibly dangerous. So the block button acts as a physical barrier against their own weakness.
Oh.
When they have a moment of longing and they think about texting you, they open the app, they see that you are blocked, and it serves as a hard stop. It forces them to maintain their emotional distance. They're basically outsourcing their self-control to an app because of their internal inability to handle conflict. It rarely has anything to do with the victim's actual worth.
That is wild. They are literally building a digital wall to keep themselves from walking at their own front door. Before we move on to the aftermath of all this, I want to share a really quick practical tip from the sources for you listening. How to tell if you've actually been blocked versus if the person just got overwhelmed and deactivated their entire account.
It's a very disorienting feeling.
So here's the trick, specifically for platforms like Instagram. If their name suddenly changes to Instagram user and their profile picture vanishes, don't panic immediately. Check with a mutual friend or pull up their profile on a web browser where you aren't logged in. If they are invisible to everyone, they just deactivated their account to take a mental health break. But if a mutual friend can still pull up their profile, see their photos, watch their stories, but your screen says, user not found, you, my friend, have been blocked.
Yeah, and having that clarity is crucial. It's a harsh reality to face, but knowing for sure is the first step out of that cognitive dissonance we talked about earlier.
Okay, so let's say you've confirmed it. You are blocked. Or you've been permanently ghosted. Does that digital wall stay up forever? Like, do they ever look back? And if you can't get an answer from them, how in the world do you move on?
Well, the permanence of a block is actually one of the biggest misconceptions. People assume a block is a lifelong sentence, but the data suggests otherwise.
Yeah, the statistics on this actually blew my mind. Over 70% of exes who block you will eventually unblock you.
It's a huge number.
And it gets even crazier. If you account for the pogo sticking effect, which is where they unblock you late at night just to snoop on your profile and then quickly block you again before morning, that number actually rises to 85%.
Because human curiosity is incredibly powerful. The initial anger or that emotional flooding that caused them to throw up the wall in the first place, it eventually fades. And when it does, that information gap theory we discussed kicks back in for them.
Oh, right.
They start wondering what you do. They want to know if you've moved on or, if you look sad without them.
Okay, so pushback here. If what you're saying is that 85% of people are eventually going to drop the wall, shouldn't I just wait? Like, shouldn't you just wait around for them to realize their mistake and finally give you the closure you deserve?
I cannot stress this enough. That is a psychological trap. Waiting for them to unblock you is an entirely ineffective, even damaging coping strategy. Relying on the person who hurt you to be the person who heals you just keeps you trapped in their orbit.
Because you are leaving your emotional recovery entirely in the hands of someone who already proved they can't communicate.
Precisely. If you are waiting for them, you exist in a state of telepressure. This is a documented phenomenon where you experience constant low-grade anxiety. You're endlessly checking your phone, feeling a physical jolt every time it buzzes, hoping for a notification that might never come. You are just marinating in cortisol. And the hard truth is, even if they do eventually unblock you, and even if they do send you a long paragraph explaining exactly why they left, your brain still won't be satisfied.
Right, because as the sources point out, if they finally text you and say, look, I just wasn't feeling the spark anymore, that doesn't fix the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain immediately just spawns 10 new questions. Well, why weren't you feeling it? Was it something I wore? When exactly did the spark die?
Exactly. Intellectualizing the breakup by demanding granular answers is often just a defense mechanism. We do it to avoid actually sitting with the grief of the loss. Your brain generates more why questions to keep the connection alive in your head. Because fighting for an answer feels like you're still in a relationship with them.
So how do we actually find peace if we can't get it from them?
It requires a fundamental shift in how we view closure. We tend to view closure as a gift someone gives to us, a neat little bow they tie on the relationship before they leave. But true closure isn't given to you. It's something you create for yourself.
Okay.
This is where your attachment style really shows up. For someone with an anxious attachment style, uncertainty feels like a literal threat to their survival. They feel they need the other person's explanation to feel safe in the world. But someone with a secure attachment style, they accept that human behavior is messy. They accept that closure might never come from the external source.
So how do you practically build that internal closure? How do you close that open door in your mind?
You have to write your own ending. Literally. Psychologists highly recommend journaling the experience, but with one critical rule. You cannot romanticize the person or the potential of what could have been. You must brutally acknowledge the reality of their actions.
So you write down the facts, like, this person could not meet my needs. When things got hard, they chose to stonewall or ghost instead of having a mature conversation. And someone who runs away from conflict does not align with the kind of partner I want to build a life with.
Exactly. You allow yourself to grieve the loss, absolutely. But you use the reality of their behavior to step back into your own power. You decide that their inability to communicate is the only answer you actually need. You don't need their permission or an unblocked notification to declare the situation finished and move forward with your life.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize all of this. We started with the brain's evolutionary hatred of open doors and how the Zeigarnik effect makes the silence of ghosting echo so loudly in our minds. We explored how stonewalling is rarely a calculated cruelty, but rather a profound nervous system overload, a literal emotional flooding.
Right.
We broke down the digital walls of blocking, from the control dynamics of narcissistic power moves to the avoidance desperate need for an artificial barrier against their own feelings. And ultimately, we arrived at the realization that waiting for an unblock is a trap. You hold the pen, you have to write your own closure.
And if there is one core truth to internalize from all of this, it is this. Whether you are dealing with a romantic partner, a best friend, or a coworker who simply vanishes, Someone else's inability to communicate is a reflection of their emotional bandwidth. It is a reflection of their fears, their unmanaged triggers, and their lack of relational tools. It is never, ever a reflection of your inherent value.
Their silence is entirely about them. It's their limitation, not your flaw.
But, stepping back and looking at the broader picture of how we interact today, it makes you wonder about the long-term cost of all this convenience. Sociologist Sherry Turkle's research touches on this, and it's something to really ponder.
What's that?
We are increasingly living in digital spaces where we can simply click a button to instantly eradicate uncomfortable human interactions. If someone annoys us, we mute them. If a conversation requires vulnerability, we ghost. If a conflict arises, we block. But as we utilize these tools to systematically engineer all the friction out of our relationships, are we quietly eroding our own emotional resilience?
Wow.
Yeah, if we structure our lives so that we never have to face the raw, messy discomfort of a difficult real-world conversation ever again, what happens to our capacity for genuine human empathy?
That is a seriously haunting thought to leave off on. We're getting so good at building walls that we're forgetting how to build bridges. So for you listening, the next time you find yourself staring at your screen, agonizing over a dead text thread or a blocked profile, remember this. That blank screen is not a measure of your worth. It's just a digital stone wall built by someone who wasn't ready to face the music. Stop knocking on a door they closed. Walk away, write your own ending, and step back into your own life.